The morning sunlight poured through the wide classroom windows, streaking the walls with lines of warmth that did not match the tension brewing inside. It was supposed to be an ordinary school day. Students were whispering about homework, about sports practice, about weekend plans. But everything shifted when Marcus walked in. Marcus was tall for his age, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the swagger of someone who believed the world owed him respect. His reputation preceded him. Everyone in the school knew he liked to push people around. He had learned that intimidation was a form of power, and he wielded it shamelessly. With his Letterman jacket draped across his shoulders, he was more than just another student. In his own mind, he was the center of every room he walked into. And then there was her, Ms. Johnson, the new teacher. She was unlike anyone Marcus had faced before. She walked into the classroom each day with quiet dignity, her back straight, her eyes steady, her voice calm. She was not flashy, not loud, not desperate to be liked. Her strength was subtle, almost invisible, yet impossible to ignore. Where other teachers might have flinched at Marcus's remarks or shrunk back from his mocking tone, Ms. Johnson stood unshaken. On this particular day, Marcus was ready to test her. It began with a small remark. "Nice sweater." "Ms. Johnson," he said loudly as she turned to write something on the chalkboard. His voice was dripping with sarcasm, and laughter erupted from a couple of his friends sitting in the back. Ms. Johnson turned, her face neutral. "Thank you, Marcus. Let us begin the lesson." Her calm dismissal of his attempt stung. He wanted more. He wanted a reaction. As she continued to explain equations, he muttered under his breath, loud enough for those around him to hear. "Who even cares about this? This is useless." "Marcus," Ms. Johnson said evenly, "if you have something constructive to add, raise your hand. Otherwise, respect the classroom." Her tone was firm but not angry, controlled but not weak. Marcus smirked. He did not like being told to respect anything. In his world, respect was something he demanded from others, not something he gave. The room grew tense, every student sensing what was about to happen. He stood up. "Why should I respect you?" he said, his voice louder now. "You don't even know how this school works. Teachers come and go, but I run this place." The room went still. A few students pulled out their phones, instinctively recording what they knew could be a moment to share online. The eyes of every classmate darted between Marcus and Ms. Johnson, but Ms. Johnson did not flinch. "Sit down, Marcus," she said softly. "We are here to learn. This is not a game." Her calmness only fueled his anger. He was used to scaring teachers, making them raise their voices, sending them running for the principal. But she was standing her ground without shouting, without fear. To him it felt like defiance. "Don't tell me what to do," Marcus barked, stepping closer. He was breathing heavier now, his pride stinging under her calm refusal to bow. Something inside him snapped, and before anyone could process what was happening, Marcus grabbed her by the collar of her sweater. Gasps echoed through the classroom. Phones rose higher in trembling hands. Students froze in their seats. Marcus's face twisted in anger as he leaned close, his voice sharp. "Say something now!" "What will you do if I don't let go?" For a split second it looked as if chaos might take over. Some students looked toward the door, wondering if they should run. Others stared in disbelief, caught between fear and fascination. But Ms. Johnson's face did not change. Her eyes locked on his, steady and calm, and in that moment, she was not the one who looked afraid. Instead, she seemed unshaken, as if she had been through storms far greater than the anger of a teenage boy. Her breathing was controlled, her voice quiet. "Marcus," she said, "let go." There was no trembling in her tone, no plea for mercy, only authority. The stillness in her gaze unsettled him more than any scream could have. His grip loosened slightly, but his pride would not let him release her completely. He expected her to shout, to push him, to call for help. Instead, she stood firm, her composure radiating something far stronger than fear. "Let go," she repeated, her words sharp and clear, like a command given on a battlefield. And this time, Marcus hesitated. The class could feel it. Something invisible hung heavy in the air. The balance of power was shifting. Marcus, who had always thrived on the fear of others, was now confronted by a presence that fear could not touch. Slowly, reluctantly, he let go. Ms. Johnson adjusted her sweater calmly, as if nothing had happened. She did not yell. She did not break down. She simply looked at him with eyes that saw more than his outburst. She saw his anger, yes, but she also saw something else. His brokenness, his insecurity, his desperate need to prove himself. "You will sit down," she said finally, her tone calm but unwavering, "and you will listen." For the first time in his life, Marcus felt small. He did not understand it then, but something inside him had shifted. The teacher he had tried to intimidate had not only stood her ground, she had exposed the weakness in his own strength. And though he did not yet know it, this moment was only the beginning of a transformation neither he nor the class would ever forget. As Marcus sank back into his chair, silence filled the room. Phones were lowered. The students were not just witnessing a confrontation, they were witnessing a lesson in real strength. And Ms. Johnson, the woman he had just tried to humiliate, had proven in a single moment that power does not come from force. It comes from discipline, courage, and composure. The class would soon learn why she carried herself this way. She was not only a teacher, she was a trained Marine. And for Marcus, the boy who had tried to choke her, this was the moment that would mark the beginning of his greatest lesson in life. The silence in the classroom after Marcus released his grip was heavier than any noise could have been. Every student sat frozen, eyes darting between him and Ms. Johnson, unsure what was about to happen next. They had seen fights before. They had seen teachers lose control, call security, or storm out in frustration. But this was different. What they were witnessing did not feel like another outburst in a school. It felt like something bigger, like the moment before a storm reveals its true force. Ms. Johnson did not reach for her phone. She did not call the principal. She did not even raise her voice. She simply stood in the middle of that room, calm as if she were standing in a quiet field instead of a classroom full of shocked teenagers. Her stillness was not weakness, it was strength contained, the kind of strength that came from years of discipline. To her students, who were used to adults reacting with anger or fear, this calm presence felt strange, almost intimidating. Marcus sat back in his chair, still defiant, but there was a flicker in his eyes. He had expected her to yell or break down, maybe even cry in front of everyone. He had wanted that. He had wanted proof that he was untouchable, that no one could stand against him. But instead, she had looked at him like she had seen through him, not just through his actions, but into who he was beneath the anger. That unsettled him more than he cared to admit. The other students whispered softly among themselves, their voices hushed but urgent. A few were still holding their phones, but even those who had started recording hesitated now. They knew this was no ordinary moment, no ordinary scene to be shared for laughs. There was a seriousness here, a weight in the air that demanded attention. Ms. Johnson stepped forward, her voice steady. "We are not going to pretend that did not happen," she said, "but we are also not going to let this room turn into chaos." She looked around at the class, her eyes landing on each student one by one, making them feel seen and addressed. "This is still a place of learning, and you will sit here and learn." Her words carried authority. They were not shouted, but they landed with more force than if she had screamed. It was the kind of authority that came not from fear, but from self-control. The students shifted uneasily in their seats. They realized she was not shaken, she was in command. Marcus let out a scoff, trying to regain the spotlight. "So what, you think you're stronger than me?" he muttered, but his voice had lost the bite it carried before. It was less of a challenge now and more of a cover for his embarrassment. Ms. Johnson turned her gaze to him. "Strength is not about who can shout the loudest or scare the most people. Strength is about control. And right now I am in control, not you." The room went completely silent again. Marcus stared at her, his mouth slightly open. No one had ever spoken to him like that before, not without fear in their voice. Most teachers either avoided him or handed him off to administrators. But here she was, standing her ground, showing no signs of backing away. For a moment, Marcus felt something he had not felt in a long time: uncertainty. His whole identity had been built on the idea that he was untouchable, that he could make people bend with a glare, a shove, or a cruel word. But this woman, who had only been his teacher for a short while, had not bent. She had stood firm, and in that firmness she revealed something he could not easily fight back against. The other students began to realize it too. They had been afraid of Marcus for years. His size, his temper, and his reputation made him untouchable in the hallways. But as they looked at Ms. Johnson standing there, calm and composed after he had tried to humiliate her, they began to see him differently. For the first time, he looked less like a leader and more like someone who had lost control of himself. Ms. Johnson walked slowly back to her desk, each step deliberate, her posture upright. She placed her chalk down, folded her hands, and looked at the class again. "We can let this moment define us in one of two ways," she said quietly. "We can let it destroy the respect in this room, or we can use it to learn something real. Not just from a book, but from life." Her words hung in the air. They did not sound like a lecture. They sounded like wisdom, spoken from someone who had lived through more than any of them could imagine. Marcus shifted in his seat, trying to act bored, but inside his chest tightened. He did not understand why her calm voice felt heavier than any punishment he had received before. Detentions, suspensions, and phone calls home had never bothered him. He had brushed them off easily. But this quiet strength made him feel exposed. As if she had seen parts of him he had tried to hide behind anger and bravado. "Class dismissed for today," Miss Johnson finally said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I want each of you to think about what just happened, not as entertainment, not as gossip, but as a lesson. We will continue tomorrow." The students hesitated, unsure whether they should pack up or wait, but when she gave a slight nod, they slowly began to gather their things. Their eyes stayed on her and on Marcus, whispers following them out the door. The story would spread quickly. By lunchtime, the whole school would know what had happened. And by the end of the week, the video clips already recorded would probably be shared more times than anyone could count. But the students who had been in the room that morning knew the truth. The video would never capture the full weight of that silence, the full power of that calm voice, or the look in Marcus's eyes when he realized his intimidation had failed. As the classroom emptied, Marcus stayed behind, sitting stiffly in his chair. Ms. Johnson did not rush him out. She simply sat at her desk, flipping through some papers, giving him space but also giving him no escape from the moment. Finally, he muttered, "You're not scared, are you?" Ms. Johnson looked up, her expression steady. "No, Marcus, I am not." He swallowed, the answer hitting him harder than he expected. No fear. That was something he had never encountered before. Everyone was always afraid. Teachers, students, even administrators who gave him second chances out of worry he might cause more trouble. But this woman, she wasn't afraid of him at all. And for reasons he couldn't explain, that made him feel both angry and curious. She leaned forward slightly. "Marcus, one day you'll learn that fear is not power. Respect is power. Discipline is power. Control is power. Until you understand that, you will always be fighting battles you cannot win." Marcus looked away, his jaw tight. He didn't want to admit it, but her words were cutting through the armor he had built around himself. As he finally stood to leave, she watched him with eyes that carried no malice, no resentment, only understanding. And that, more than anything, shook him. When Marcus walked out of the classroom, he realized that he had not won that confrontation. In fact, for the first time in his life, he felt like he had lost, and not just to a teacher, but to something deeper. To strength that was not loud or violent, but steady, disciplined, and unshakable. What he did not yet know was that Ms. Johnson's calm strength had not been born in a classroom. It had been forged long before in places far more difficult than he could imagine. She had once worn a different uniform. She had once been trained to face fear head-on. She had once served her country as a Marine. And the boy who thought he could break her would soon learn that she was the one who would rebuild him. The whispers spread faster than wildfire. By lunchtime, the cafeteria was buzzing with fragments of what had happened in Ms. Johnson's classroom. Every table had a version of the story. Some said Marcus had almost attacked her, and she stood frozen like a statue. Others swore she had stared him down so hard that he let go out of fear. The details changed with every retelling, but one thing remained consistent. Marcus, the boy who ruled the hallways with his temper, had been silenced. For many students, this was shocking. They were used to seeing teachers fold under his pressure, sometimes even turning a blind eye just to avoid conflict. But Ms. Johnson had done something no one else dared. She had not flinched. Her silence, her steady eyes, and her controlled voice had left more of an impact than any suspension or expulsion could. By the end of the day, small groups of students were not just gossiping about what happened. They were curious about her. Who was she really? She didn't act like other teachers. She didn't shout to gain control. And she didn't hand out punishments just to prove a point. She carried herself with a kind of confidence that seemed unshakable, almost as if she had seen bigger battles before stepping into the classroom. That curiosity deepened when one student, who had an older brother in the military, whispered a rumor that left everyone stunned. She was in the Marines. At first, no one believed it. A teacher, a Marine. It sounded like something out of a movie. But then the idea began to make sense. The way she stood, the way she spoke with clarity, the way she remained calm under pressure, all of it fit. That evening, while most students went home with the story still ringing in their ears, Marcus sat in his room staring at the ceiling. The scene replayed over and over in his mind. The way she had looked at him without fear, the way her voice hadn't trembled, the way she had told him strength was about control. He hated it, or at least he told himself he hated it. But deep down, buried beneath the anger, he felt something else. Respect. It was an unfamiliar feeling, one he didn't know how to handle. For years he had built his identity on being the one others respected out of fear. But for the first time, he had met someone who earned respect not through intimidation but through presence, and it unsettled him in ways he couldn't put into words. The next day, when Marcus walked into the classroom, the energy was different. Students were still whispering, still sneaking glances at him and Ms. Johnson. Phones were ready again, but this time the anticipation was different. No one wanted to miss the next moment in what felt like a story unfolding before their eyes. Ms. Johnson entered the room as she always did, calm, composed, with her shoulders squared. She placed her books on the desk, picked up a piece of chalk, and began writing on the board. No mention of yesterday, no acknowledgement of the whispers. Her silence was not ignorance. It was control. Marcus shifted in his seat, waiting for her to say something to single him out. But she didn't. She carried on with the lesson, speaking with the same steady voice, as if nothing had happened. That, more than anything, unsettled him again. Finally, unable to take the silence anymore, Marcus muttered, "Everyone thinks you're some kind of Marine." His voice was laced with sarcasm, but his eyes were searching for an answer. The class fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned to Ms. Johnson, waiting. She paused for a moment, then set down the chalk. Turning to face the class, she folded her arms, her expression unreadable. "And what if I was?" she asked softly. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Marcus smirked, but inside he felt his chest tighten. "Then it would make sense," one of the girls in the back whispered. Ms. Johnson walked to the center of the room, her gaze sweeping over the students. "You all seem curious about who I am," she said. "Let me tell you something. Yes, before I became a teacher, I served in the United States Marine Corps. I trained, I deployed, and I lived through experiences that taught me lessons no textbook can provide. And those lessons are why I am here today." The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Marcus's smirk faded. He had expected her to deny it, to laugh it off, to dismiss the rumor as childish. Instead, she owned it, with the same calm confidence she carried into everything else. She continued, her voice steady. "In the Marines, I learned that strength is not about how much force you can use. It's about discipline. It's about staying calm when everything around you is falling apart. It's about respect, for yourself and for others. Those lessons kept me alive, and they made me who I am. Now I am here to pass them on, not just through history lessons or equations, but through example." The words hung in the air, heavier than any lecture they had ever heard. The students sat straighter, listening. For once, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Small. He clenched his fists, trying to push the feeling away. But deep down he couldn't deny it. When she spoke, it wasn't just words. It was truth. He could hear it in the tone of her voice, in the way she carried herself. This wasn't a teacher bluffing to scare students into behaving. This was someone who had lived through storms far greater than the chaos of a high school classroom. The class ended quietly that day. Students left in hushed conversations, the weight of her words still pressing on them. Some were inspired, some were in awe, and a few, like Marcus, were unsettled in ways they couldn't yet explain. But one thing was certain, the truth was out. Ms. Johnson wasn't just a teacher. She was a Marine, and Marcus, the bully who had tried to choke her, was about to learn that her greatest lesson for him had only just begun. When the truth about Ms. Johnson's past spread through the school, the air around her seemed to shift. She was no longer just the quiet new teacher with sharp eyes and calm words. She was the Marine, the woman who had faced storms, commands, and pressure that most of the students could not even imagine. For many, the knowledge gave them a new sense of respect. They looked at her differently, sat straighter in class, and paid more attention when she spoke. But for Marcus, the revelation hit him harder than he wanted to admit. He had always been the one to stand tall, to intimidate, to make people bend under his presence. Now, for the first time, he felt small in comparison to someone who did not even try to make him feel that way. Her strength was effortless, and that cut deeper than any punishment could. The day after she confirmed her military background, Marcus was called into the principal's office. He walked in expecting the usual routine: suspension, angry phone calls home, maybe a meeting with his mother who worked 2 jobs and rarely had time to deal with his school troubles. He leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, trying to look bored. But when he walked in, he froze. Ms. Johnson was sitting in one of the chairs, waiting. The principal cleared his throat. "Marcus, you know what happened yesterday was serious. Laying your hands on a teacher is grounds for immediate suspension and possibly expulsion." Marcus smirked, though his stomach twisted. "So just kick me out already. Who cares?" The principal rubbed his temples. "You should care. You're wasting your future." Before he could continue, Ms. Johnson spoke. Her voice was steady but carried weight. "I have a different suggestion." The principal raised an eyebrow. "Go on." Ms. Johnson looked directly at Marcus, her gaze sharp but not cruel. "Marcus doesn't need another suspension. That won't change him. What he needs is discipline. What he needs is structure. And I'm willing to give him that if he accepts it." Marcus frowned, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Ms. Johnson said calmly, "you have 2 choices. You can take the easy road, the one you've taken before. Suspension, more time wasted, another mark on your record. Or," she leaned forward slightly, "you can work with me. I'll train you, teach you discipline the same way I was trained. But it won't be easy. It will push you harder than you've ever been pushed before. You'll have to earn respect the right way." Marcus blinked, caught off guard. He had expected punishment, maybe anger, maybe even shouting. But this was something entirely new. His mind raced. "Training? With her?" The principal looked uncertain. "Are you sure about this, Ms. Johnson?" "This is unusual," she nodded. "I am sure. Marcus doesn't need to be thrown away. He needs to be rebuilt." Her words hit him like a brick. No teacher had ever said something like that to him. Most just wanted him gone, out of sight, out of their classroom. But here she was, offering him a chance. Not to escape punishment, but to change. Marcus forced a laugh, trying to cover the uncomfortable feeling rising in his chest. "So what, you want me to do push-ups and run around the track? You think that'll change me?" Ms. Johnson didn't smile. "I don't think I know. Because I've seen boys tougher than you break down and rebuild themselves into men of respect. And you're not beyond that, not yet. But the choice is yours." Her eyes locked on his, unblinking. For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Part of him wanted to reject her, to keep playing the role he had built for himself. But another part, a small, quiet part he rarely listened to, felt drawn to the idea. A chance to prove himself in a different way. A chance to be strong without needing to scare anyone. The principal looked at him, waiting. "Well, Marcus?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Fine. Whatever. I'll do it." His voice carried sarcasm, but deep down, he knew he had just agreed to something that might change everything. That evening, Ms. Johnson met him on the school track. She wore simple athletic clothes, her hair tied back, and a whistle around her neck. Marcus arrived late, dragging his feet, still trying to convince himself that this was a waste of time. "You're late," she said simply. He shrugged. "It's not like I signed up for this." "Yes, you did. You made a choice. And now you're here, drop down." 20 push-ups, Marcus laughed. "You're kidding, right?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Do I look like I'm kidding?" Reluctantly, he lowered himself to the ground and started. After 5, his arms began to shake. After 10, he was sweating. By 15, he collapsed onto the track, groaning. "Get up," Ms. Johnson said. "You're not done until you finish." "This is stupid," Marcus muttered, but he forced himself back up, gritting his teeth as he pushed through the last few. When he finished, he rolled onto his back, panting. Ms. Johnson crouched beside him, her tone calm. "You think this is hard? This is nothing. Discipline isn't about what feels easy. It's about pushing yourself past the point where you want to quit. That's where strength is built." Marcus stared at the sky, his chest rising and falling. For the first time, he felt something other than anger coursing through him. Exhaustion, yes, but also a strange sense of accomplishment. He had wanted to quit, but he hadn't. And that was just the beginning. Over the next week, Ms. Johnson pushed him harder each day. Running laps, push-ups, sit-ups, drills that made his muscles ache and his pride crack. But with every drop of sweat, something inside him began to shift. He stopped making excuses. He stopped trying to act like it didn't matter. Slowly, he started to listen. She never raised her voice at him. She didn't need to. Her calm authority was enough. And as the days turned into weeks, Marcus realized something he had never admitted before. He respected her. Not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it. One afternoon, after a grueling workout, he sat on the bleachers, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Why are you doing this for me?" he asked quietly. Ms. Johnson looked at him, her expression softening for the first time. "Because someone once did it for me. I was angry, lost, ready to throw my life away. But someone believed I could be more. And they were right. Now it's my turn to believe in you." The words settled deep in his chest. He didn't respond right away, but for the first time in years he felt something he thought he had lost. Hope. And though he would never admit it out loud, he knew that this was the turning point. The day he stopped being just a bully and started becoming something else. The first few days of training had been a shock to Marcus's system, but as the weeks rolled on, the real challenge began. The workouts grew harder, the drills longer, and Ms. Johnson never allowed excuses. Each time Marcus thought he had reached his limit, she reminded him calmly, "You have more in you. Keep going." Marcus discovered quickly that discipline was far more painful than any detention slip or suspension he had ever endured. When he was suspended before, he used the time to sleep, play video games, and roam the streets. It had never cost him anything. But now every mistake cost him sweat, every act of defiance cost him push-ups, and every careless word earned him an extra lap around the track. There were days he hated her for it. "Why are you doing this to me?" He would snap between gasps of breath, collapsing on the ground after a sprint. "Because you chose this," she would reply firmly. "And because I see what you could be if you stopped running from yourself." He hated that answer, but he also carried it with him. The lessons weren't only physical. Ms. Johnson began teaching him about respect in ways that felt unfamiliar. When he arrived late, she made him stand silently in front of the flagpole until he understood the value of time. When he cursed under his breath at another student, she had him write letters of apology, not as punishment, but as practice in humility. When he shoved his way past someone in the hallway, she called him out and had him walk the hall again, this time moving with patience, acknowledging everyone he passed. At first, Marcus treated all of it like a game he didn't want to play. He rolled his eyes, muttered under his breath, and complained loudly. But no matter what he did, Ms. Johnson never reacted with anger. She never lost her cool. She simply held her ground, calm and steady, like she always had. And slowly that steadiness began to wear down his walls. One morning, after a particularly brutal training session, Marcus collapsed onto the bleachers, dripping with sweat. He pulled his hoodie over his face, trying to hide his exhaustion. Ms. Johnson sat down beside him, her voice quiet. "Do you know why I don't let you quit?" she asked. Marcus pulled the hoodie down just enough to glance at her. "Because you like torturing me?" She almost smiled, but her expression stayed serious. "Because every time you think you've reached your limit, you're wrong. There's always more in you. You've spent years proving how tough you are by scaring people. But real toughness is what you do when no one is watching. When it hurts, when you want to quit." Her words lingered in his chest. He wanted to brush them off, but deep down, he knew they were true. The following week, the real test came. During gym class, another student, smaller than Marcus, bumped into him accidentally. Old habits kicked in, and Marcus shoved the boy hard. The other student stumbled back, looking terrified. For a moment, the old Marcus wanted to push further, to reclaim that feeling of control. But then he saw Ms. Johnson standing at the edge of the gym, her eyes on him. She didn't say a word, but her look said everything. Something inside Marcus shifted. He reached down, helped the boy up, and muttered, "My bad." The gym fell silent. No one had ever seen Marcus apologize before. The boy looked at him in shock, then nodded quickly and walked away. After class, Ms. Johnson approached him. "That," she said simply, "was harder for you than any push-up." Marcus looked away, embarrassed. But he felt something new that day. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't shame. It was the beginning of respect for himself and for others. The hard lessons continued. There were days he stumbled back into old habits, days he mouthed off, days he skipped out on training. Each time, Ms. Johnson didn't lecture him. She didn't yell. She just held him accountable. If he missed practice, she doubled it the next day. If he broke his word, she made him face the people he had wronged. It wasn't about punishment, it was about responsibility. And slowly, Marcus began to change. He started showing up on time. He started finishing drills without complaining. He started paying attention in class, not because he suddenly loved math or history, but because he realized respect meant effort. His classmates noticed the difference too. The boy who once ruled the halls with intimidation was quieter now, calmer, less quick to lash out. One afternoon, sitting on the bleachers after another long run, Marcus finally admitted what he had been avoiding. "I don't get it," he muttered. "Why do you even care? Why don't you just give up on me like everyone else?" Ms. Johnson looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Because someone once cared about me when I didn't deserve it. They saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. And that saved my life. Now, Marcus, I'm doing the same for you. Because whether you believe it or not, you are more than the anger you carry. You are more than the mistakes you've made." Marcus swallowed hard, his chest tightening. He looked away, blinking quickly to keep his emotions from showing. No one had ever said something like that to him. Not a teacher, not even his mother, who loved him but was too busy trying to keep their lives afloat. For the first time in years, Marcus felt something unfamiliar, a sense of worth. From that day forward, his effort deepened. He still struggled. He still slipped. But he tried. He pushed himself through laps even when his lungs burned. He held his tongue when students teased him. He raised his hand in class instead of blurting out insults. Every step was small, but together they marked the start of something bigger, and Ms. Johnson was there for every step, steady as ever, reminding him that strength was not about control over others, but control over himself. It was not easy. It was not quick, but it was real. And Marcus, the boy who once thought power meant making others afraid, was beginning to learn that the hardest lesson of all was learning to respect himself first. Weeks turned into months, and the boy who once thrived on intimidation began to move differently. Marcus no longer stormed into classrooms with the same arrogant swagger. His shoulders were still broad, his presence still noticeable, but there was a calmness in the way he carried himself. He no longer felt the need to bark out insults to get attention. He had learned that silence, paired with discipline, spoke louder than words ever could. The first time his classmates noticed the change was subtle. A girl who had once avoided sitting anywhere near him quietly took the desk beside his one morning. Marcus did not tease her, did not smirk, did not say a word. He simply nodded, opened his notebook, and started writing. It was a small act, but for those who had lived under his shadow for years, it was shocking. At first, many thought it was temporary. Maybe he was just keeping his head down until the heat blew over. But as days passed, the pattern repeated. He listened more, interrupted less. He trained after school with Ms. Johnson, pushing himself harder each week. He even began helping his mother around the house without being asked, something she noticed with quiet gratitude. The moment that truly opened everyone's eyes came one afternoon in the cafeteria. Two younger students were being mocked by a group of older boys for the way they dressed. Normally, Marcus would have joined in or at least laughed from the sidelines. But that day he stood up from his table, walked over, and planted himself between the bullies and their targets. "Cut it out," he said firmly. The older boys laughed. "Since when do you care, Marcus?" One of them sneered. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not shove anyone. He simply stood tall, his expression steady. "I said cut it out. Find something better to do." There was something in his tone, calm, controlled but unshakable, that made the older boys hesitate. They muttered insults under their breath but eventually backed down, leaving the younger students alone. The cafeteria buzzed with whispers. The bully had defended someone. The same boy who once thrived on making others small had used his presence to protect instead of harm. That night, Marcus lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling. He thought about how it had felt to stand up, not for himself, but for someone else. For the first time, his strength had not come from anger. It had come from choice. And that realization changed something deep inside him. The next day at training, he brought it up to Ms. Johnson. Yesterday in the cafeteria, I didn't even think about it. I just did it. It felt different. Ms. Johnson studied him for a moment, then nodded. That's because you're beginning to understand. Strength isn't about making yourself look big by making others feel small. It's about standing firm when it matters most. That's what respect really is. Marcus frowned, staring at the ground. Why did it take me so long to get it? Because the hardest lessons are the ones that don't come from books, she said quietly. They come from life. And life only teaches when you're ready to listen. Her words sank into him. For the first time, Marcus realized he was ready to listen. Over the following weeks, the change grew clearer. He became more focused in class, sometimes even helping classmates with work he had once mocked. He began greeting teachers in the hallway, not with sarcasm but with genuine acknowledgement. Students who had once feared him started approaching him for help or advice. One afternoon, a younger boy stopped him in the hallway. "Hey, Marcus, thanks for what you did in the cafeteria." Marcus shrugged, trying to act casual, but inside something warm stirred. Respect, not fear, real respect. Later, as he ran laps on the track with Ms. Johnson, he thought about it again. People don't look at me the same anymore, he admitted. It's weird. They don't look scared, they just look at me. Ms. Johnson slowed her pace and looked at him. That's because you're finally letting them see who you really are. Not the angry mask you wore. Not the boy who thought fear was strength. They see you. Her words hit him harder than any workout. For years, Marcus had hidden behind his anger, using it like armor. But now, for the first time, he felt what it was like to be seen. Not as a threat, but as a person worth respecting. The real test came when he faced temptation again. One afternoon during gym, another boy mocked him under his breath, testing him the way Marcus had once tested Ms. Johnson. The old Marcus would have snapped, shoved him, maybe started a fight just to prove dominance. But this time Marcus took a deep breath, steadied himself, and let it go. He finished the drill, walked past the boy, and didn't give him the reaction he wanted. That night Ms. Johnson asked him how it felt. Strange, he admitted. Like I didn't lose anything by walking away. I actually feel stronger. That's because you are stronger, she replied. It takes more strength to control yourself than to control others. It was then that Marcus truly realized the depth of her lessons. For so long he had thought control came from making others bend. But real control, the kind that mattered, came from within. The realization didn't make him perfect. He still stumbled. He still caught himself slipping into old habits. But each time he corrected himself faster. Each time he remembered Ms. Johnson's voice, calm and steady, reminding him of what strength really was. And slowly, the boy who once ruled the halls with fear began to inspire something entirely new. Respect, trust, even admiration. His classmates saw it. His teachers saw it. And most importantly, Marcus finally began to see it in himself. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt that he was more than the anger he carried. He was capable of change. He was capable of respect. He was capable of becoming the kind of man Ms. Johnson believed he could be. And that realization was more powerful than anything he had ever known. The semester was nearing its end, and the air in the school hallways carried the usual energy of exams, year-end projects, and plans for the summer. But for Marcus, this time felt different. He wasn't just another student trying to make it through the days. He was a young man standing on the edge of change. Every morning when he looked in the mirror, he saw someone he barely recognized, someone stronger, calmer, and more in control than the angry boy he had been just months before. What made it even more powerful was how others saw him now. His classmates no longer whispered about him out of fear. Instead, they spoke of him with a kind of surprise, almost disbelief, as if they were still adjusting to the new Marcus. Teachers who once dreaded his presence now nodded at him with approval. Even his mother noticed the difference at home. He helped with groceries, asked her about her day, and even apologized when he spoke harshly. These were small things, but to her, they were proof of something bigger. Her son was growing. One afternoon, the school held its annual assembly, where students were recognized for achievements, academic, athletic, and personal. Normally, Marcus would have skipped it. He never cared about awards, and sitting in a crowded auditorium wasn't his idea of fun. But Ms. Johnson encouraged him to attend. Sometimes, she told him, you need to see yourself the way others see you. He didn't know what she meant until his name was called. The principal stood at the podium, reading from a card. This year, we want to recognize a student who has shown remarkable growth and change. A student who, despite challenges, has demonstrated resilience, discipline, and respect. Please join me in applauding Marcus. The room erupted in applause. For a moment, Marcus froze in his seat. Him? Recognition for something good? He had always been the student called out for trouble, for fights, for failing grades, never for respect, never for change. He stood slowly, walking to the stage as hundreds of eyes followed him. His heart pounded in his chest, and he could feel the heat of the spotlight. He took the small certificate from the principal's hand, then glanced out at the audience. Among the faces, he saw Ms. Johnson sitting calmly in the crowd, her expression steady but her eyes proud. Something inside him broke open in that moment. The weight of everything, the training, the lessons, the discipline, the chance she had given him flooded through him. And before he knew it, he was speaking into the microphone. I wasn't expecting this, he began, his voice shaky. I don't usually get recognized for anything good, but I guess things change. A ripple of laughter ran through the audience, not mocking, but supportive. He took a deep breath. I need to say something. When I started this year, I was angry. At everything. At everyone. I thought being strong meant making people afraid of me. I thought that's how you got respect. But then, his eyes shifted toward Ms. Johnson. Then I met a teacher who showed me I was wrong. Who showed me that real strength isn't about scaring people. It's about controlling yourself. About standing tall without tearing others down. The auditorium was quiet now, every ear tuned to his words. She didn't give up on me when she had every reason to. She didn't let me throw my life away even when I tried to. She believed I could be better, even when I didn't believe it myself. And that's why I'm standing here today. His voice cracked, but he kept going. So thank you, Ms. Johnson. You didn't just teach me in class. You taught me how to live. You changed my life. The applause that followed was thunderous. Students stood, clapping and cheering. Teachers wiped tears from their eyes. And Ms. Johnson, sitting quietly among them, simply nodded, her expression calm, her pride steady but unspoken. For Marcus, that moment was more powerful than any fight he had ever won, more lasting than any fear he had ever caused. This was respect, the kind that could not be forced, only earned. In the weeks that followed, Marcus continued his training, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Running laps, doing push-ups, focusing in class, it all became part of who he was. He even began helping younger students who struggled, guiding them the way Ms. Johnson had guided him. He discovered that leadership didn't come from intimidation, but from example. One afternoon, as he and Ms. Johnson walked off the track after a long workout, Marcus spoke quietly. Do you think I can really keep this up? Like for life? Ms. Johnson looked at him, her expression thoughtful. That depends. Do you want to keep it up? He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I do. I don't want to go back to who I was. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice firm but gentle. Then you won't. Because the man you are becoming is stronger than the boy you used to be. And once you know the difference, you can't unlearn it. Those words stayed with him. They became his anchor, his reminder on hard days. And whenever he felt himself slipping, he remembered the calm eyes of the teacher who never feared him, the Marine who had turned his life around with discipline, patience, and belief. Years later, when Marcus looked back on his life, he would mark that school year as the turning point, the moment a bully learned the true meaning of strength. But even in the moment, as a teenager standing taller than he ever had before, he knew this truth. Change was possible. Respect was possible. And sometimes all it took was one person who refused to give up on you to show you the way.